There is so much more. And we are absolutely delighted to welcome Jim Taylor from a company with a number of, I would say, labels, but the one we're going to use today is OrangeBox. And we're going to look at something called ergonomics. Now, some of you might not even know, um, no disrespect, how to spell the word, but Jim is going to take us on a bit of a journey. What ergonomics is, how they can actually transform things for teachers as well as learners. Jim, over to you. Do share your screen and welcome.
Thank you so much, Marius, for the introduction. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can someone put the thumbs
Lovely.
up? Yeah,
Perfect.
great. Absolutely right. Now, my background, I trained as a furniture designer originally, and then got interested in human factors, partly because the world around me wasn't fitting particularly well as a left-handed person and someone who was 6'3". And in later life, I'm now getting the signs of aging with a little bit of hearing impairment and the normal signs of visual discomfort. So why should the world feel more hostile for me than what people might call the average individual? So we spend our lives trying to design spaces for everybody in a more universal and inclusive way. So I'm going to, as the warm-up act, I'm not going to talk specifically about technology, but I'm going to just take a holistic approach to how you might use ergonomics in the learning environment, what it is, what the risks are, what the benefits are of applying ergonomics, what can be done inexpensively, and what to look out for when refurbishing or building new. Now, those of you who are old enough to remember the metal work classes at school might have had access to a lathe. And there's a classic example of the human having to fit the piece of machinery rather than the other way around. If you really wanted to make the machine work for you, that's anatomically what you should be looking like. That's as close as the ergonomists get to something mildly humorous. We'll park that. The subject areas include all sorts of areas, including mental workload, stress, biomechanics, and the application areas are very broad too. But essentially, it's a good fit between the individual and the tools they're using, the work that they're doing, and the environment they're working in, so that they can be healthier, happier, more productive. And we can use ergonomics as a predictive tool when we start mapping out the changing work or learning environments. And we look down the lens of the impact of technology, changing user population, and even changing cultures. And there's been a big shift since COVID, of course, when we all had to retreat home. And some people have gained from that and some people haven't. So there's always a place for ergonomics as a predictive tool to help plan the future. Now, my first little bit of homework for you is to wear your ergonomic goggles when you go back to the learning environment, or you look at your home working environment or the work environment you're in, and just look out for the ways that humans adapt the environment to make themselves more comfortable. So on the right, we have a commuter on the way into Paddington. There were places where this character could have sat, but they chose to convert the luggage rack into a standing workstation. They might be a back sufferer. They might have heard something about, the benefits of standing for some of the day. This family on the left are making bricks, and I'm pretty sure they didn't have any formal ergonomics training, but they discovered through trial and error that they could be more productive if their assembly bench was roughly 50 millimeters below their relaxed elbow height. And I was there watching this family. The younger brother has 16 bricks that are going to be stacked on his head before he goes off to the kiln. He's got a great squat, great manual handling pose, and his older brother has a great assembly bench. So put your ergonomic goggles on and just let's see what people are doing to adapt where the environment is a little bit hostile. It might be they have an extra coat on when they don't need to, or they've rolled up the coat to act as an extra lumbar support, or you can see that they're straining to hear what's going on, or they've improvised with jacking up the desk a little bit. And that will give us some clues as to where the environment isn't working so well. And some of it is not just about listening to the body when it's aching, but also having a bit of education, because we might feel this is a fairly sort of harmless view. You know, teenagers working everywhere at every opportunity with constant access to technology. But we do know there's more teenagers booked up with osteopaths and chiropractors than ever before. And if you were to flip her at 90 degrees and take an X-ray, the undue pressure on the neck and the discs could be leading to serious discomfort short-term and more permanent damage long-term. So I must warn you, the next 10 minutes are going to be a little bit depressing as we go through the risks, but there is a happy ending. But whatever setting that we're looking at, we've got to try and perhaps encourage a more healthy, upright posture. That's the way we were designed after all. So it's very easy after a while to end up slumping over a desk. It's very easy if we're carrying a heavy load to put it on one shoulder, and you can see the effect that it's having on the spine. And it starts early on. Maybe some of us are guilty of moving our technology onto our children when we get an upgrade. And it used to be the TV that was the big distraction when we were young. But, you know, children as young as 6 months are being given an iPad. And we're seeing new symptoms creeping through when it comes to musculoskeletal disorders, anything to do with physical discomfort, whether it's iPad neck, texting wrist. And if we were to get our colleagues from the health and safety department looking at schools, they'd be quite horrified at some of the setups. This would be considered illegal in the workplace. And of course, there isn't quite the same protection for children in schools as there is for the workplace. And this slide is a bit out of date in terms of one-to-one tablet use in the next 5 years. It's probably greater than that if we include other types of technology too. So a little bit of education and awareness is important along the way. What about visual impairment? We tend to hold our technology a little bit closer to us and we forget to blink compared with a book, and that can lead to eye strain. I don't know if any of you felt that during lockdown when 100% of our conversations with our colleagues were through a screen, but we need to just think more holistically about being able to rest the eyes at infinity, designing a space and the work that can mix things up a little bit in terms of eye health too. And children, of course, have made friends during lockdown with people overseas online, and what we used to call bedrooms, the entertainment centres, means that quite often children are not actually getting the full 7-8 hours sleep that we're designed to get. It's when brain development occurs. It's when we can restore torn ligaments. And it's actually quite crucial that we get those 7-8 hours sleep. But if the temptation is for the gaming to overspill a little bit, you know, for some time now, there has been an observation that children are more tired. And there is research to suggest that there are issues long-term with risks to do with, and I'm sorry to depress you, but increased risk of heart disease and cancers associated with long-term disrupted sleep. So it's a bit depressing, but it's interesting again if we put our ergonomic goggles on, what happens. You can see on the right, this was taken about 10 years ago when iPads were first around. We're very good at adapting the environment, as I said earlier, to make us more comfortable. So 2 of these are my children. On the stairs, 3 of them have found a perfect place where they could prop the iPad up for comfortable, hands-free viewing of the screen. Finn's in trouble. He's in danger of passing out, but the rest of them had a nice place to go and view the technology. But what happened when we took the technology away? Um, they started improvising again, and they found it far more fun to see how many could squeeze underneath the stairs. Um, and it just gives you some idea of mixing things up again in terms of the active classroom environment. Let's just think about the definitions that trip off our tongue. Health. What do we mean by health? A state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And that's a good definition for ergonomics. It isn't just back pain, it's the whole mental and social element too. And when we talk about well-being, it's defined by the World Health Organization as a dynamic process emerging from the way people interact with the world around them. So that's a good invitation for all of us to actually get involved in really scrutinizing the learning environment that we're expecting our children to excel in. And what can schools do? Well, there are some initiatives out there in terms of at least familiarizing ourselves with the standards and the guidelines that are actually out there. And we can share an ergonomic checklist with you. We can get that circulated to you. There are standards for classroom furniture, BSEN 1729, to ensure that it's both strong enough, stable enough, and dimensionally that it fits the intended audience. And we can also provide a little bit more variety in terms of choice when it comes to furniture too. And it might be that you revisit what you've got to see whether 10 or 20% of the furniture could be adapted, or when the stock gets old, when you're thinking about replacing, that maybe 10 or 20% of the classroom should have something that's a little bit more adjustable for the taller and the shorter, or has a sloping surface, or is actually for those who need the ability to sort of let off steam with a little bit of fidgeting or stimming, have access to furniture and equipment where they've got permission to do that. We can also include parents in this, because as the homework creeps up, or if we have future situations where there's more home learning, is to ensure that there is a safe place that does fit the children, where they can actually study. And being aware of that furniture mismatch. So quite typically in a classroom, we might have one size of chair, and for the smaller child, it might mean their feet are dangling, or they can't actually wriggle backwards to get the back support because the seat's too deep. It might be that we need to think a little bit more about the storage. If on certain days of the week, there's a lot of equipment being carried by the children so that they don't have to lug that around the school environment. You know, these are all things that are maybe something to think about, because the benefits actually aren't just about avoiding back pain in middle life, but helping you right now when it comes to things like concentration in the classroom. So I touched on the standards, and some of you may be very familiar with this. They're color-coded, the chairs, so that different age groups within reason are matched pretty well to the chairs. That becomes a challenge in secondary schools, but generally speaking, that is something to be managed. For the larger schools, it might be there's a lower and an upper school, and the chair sizes are different in both. And certainly for the younger age groups, again, between infants and juniors, the chair sizes should be different. And of course, we mustn't forget the teachers. There is furniture out there for teachers so that they don't have to get too low. It is an occupational hazard in terms of back pain for teachers working in with the younger age groups. We can forward information on appropriate furniture in the classroom for staff as well. And it's a good idea to sort of think about the full ergonomic footprint in a classroom, because some of the time we want our students to actually work at the table and perhaps process work in a more formal way, or recline when they're listening. but also for elements of the teaching period, we want them to collaborate with others. We want them perhaps, we want to recognize that there are different learning styles. And so there may be a whole array of body postures that we could think about. And so when we are beginning to look at alternative furniture to encourage active learning, we can give that a sort of ergonomic footprint score. And you might think that I'm anti-beanbags, for example, but if you're young and agile, they're pretty good. They remind me of the Edwardian nursing chair, if you've ever come across one of those, where they're very low slung, and they were designed so that mum could take a rest while she's feeding the baby. So the baby rests on the upwardly sloping thighs of the mum, so that the baby can be presented to the milk and she can be hands-free and just relax more comfortably. And here we have a iGen character who again's nursing his baby. Happens to be a laptop, but the neck's not too flexed. Horizontal line of sight is in line with the top of the screen, so it's all pretty good. Just don't deploy it in the staff room if you've got to text a friend to pull yourself out. So we have to think about the age, the activity, and the duration. And so you'll be surprised what's possible when we start thinking about that. And we can design the classroom with a bit more wellness and a bit more choice. I'm not suggesting this is a classroom. This is a view of one of the spaces we've looked at, but just providing a few alternative spaces, whether you want to concentrate or whether you want to collaborate, or whether you need to rehydrate, is just thinking about different spaces, either inside or immediately outside the classroom, where you might keep the active learning going, which again improves concentration. Now, it needn't be an expensive refurbishment. It could be quite light touch. You'll see in front of you simple writing slopes, art slopes, and simple wedges that can be made within the school or can be purchased at reasonable prices. But it does mean, if you look at the posture of the girl on the right there, she can maintain really good posture. If the work is presented more towards her, it helps with learning to write and motor control of the pen. And you may well sometimes make use of pediatric occupational health professionals who will come in and specify writing surfaces that are sloped or wedges to improve some children's concentration. Well, really, it applies to all of us. It's good for all of us to have some of these interventions. There are other furniture types on the market. You think about the classic plastic chair on the right. What happens when you're coming forward is hard work. They're really designed from an era when the idea was to throw the occupant into the backrest with a slightly sloping backwards angle. The chair on the left does both. It tilts forward when you're coming to work and it tilts back when you want to listen. So there are products out there to help. And if it's a cantilevered chair rather than one with four legs, if you're the poor student that's ended up with a forest of table legs underneath you and you're finding it difficult to get in and out, then that cantilever helps with egress and ingress, and it also provides a bit of bounce as well. So any micro movement we can build into the working day is great. There's even backpacks that some are better than others in terms of distributing the weight. And this particular one from the National Back Pain Association, Back Care, even gives advice to children on how to carry the weight and to check how much they're carrying. And it shouldn't be more than about 10% of your body weight. I was involved in designing this, and we did a project with Blue Peter. And we did a survey and discovered 11-year-olds were particularly at risk because they start secondary school, they panic with the timetable, they put absolutely everything into the bag to avoid the risk of actually missing a class with the wrong textbooks. But carrying 25-30% of your body weight is the equivalent of, Marines in the Middle East. It's a lot of weight for a developing body. So a bit of education, again, I think always goes a long way. If you are faced with a refurbishment, there's a school of thought that suggests that with reshaping some of the layouts and maybe removing the odd wall, gives you opportunities to lever other elements of the building, so that all the teaching doesn't have to happen within the four walls of the classroom. Maybe there is a little bit more flexibility that can occur when we start using some of those other spaces too. And of course, the classic approach to user-centered design is to make sure that all the key stakeholders, including the people you're designing for, are involved in the process too. And that becomes particularly important when we're thinking about neurodiversity, and understanding, the needs of everybody and getting children involved in the process. I'm talking to you from our showroom in London, and we frequently have school trips here. Sixth formers, will come and kick the tires on the furniture that we have here, and it's where we get our sources of inspiration, quite honestly, because they can be quite brutal and honest, and that's what we need. So involving the children in the design process, prototyping, getting that feedback, doing a pre and post occupancy survey to see how effective the space has occurred. Very similar to, I'm sure, some of the conversations you're going to have later today about piloting the technology and seeing how well that goes down. I think finally for me, just need to keep an eye on the time. How are we doing? Not too bad. Is to talk about acoustics, because as it's one of the biggest challenges in schools, and we refer to different layers of privacy. And there are occasions where, some of the buildings are not very kind acoustically. There's a lot of reflective surfaces and concrete. And anything you can do to absorb some of that sound with soft furnishings, with treatment on the walls, with a bit of etiquette, and also with some choices of furniture, means that you can approach this in terms of layers of privacy. So sensory ergonomics is that extra layer of comfort that I just want to finish on. And we want to make sure that the space is delivering on degrees of pleasurableness, if you like, so that it can be, when you need it, exciting, pleasing, exhilarating, rather than what might happen if things get out of control, a bit too tense and frenzied. Equally, there may be areas where you want the serene and the calm. And what I'm suggesting is the interior and the furniture and the technology can do something to help deliver those objectives. Now, down in Wales, where our HQ is, just another thing on the subject of sensory ergonomics, is an initiative called Cynefin, and it's working its way into the Welsh curriculum. And it's quite fascinating because it's referring to habitat and our connection with our surroundings. And that might be a theme that you approach if you were ever looking to refurbish a room or a school, in terms of celebrating, the historical context in which you operate, or perhaps the culture that you want to reflect, the heroes that you know about, and some of the goals and ambitions that you have, but making sure that children feel that they have a proper connection. This is the social element of ergonomics: physical, mental, and social well-being. That idea that schools could have a sense of being a second home, so that people feel really comfortable sociably with the environment that they're working in. So that's one for you to bring up at the table tonight at tea time. Cynefin, so a Welsh word for you. And really, For those who might have come across ergonomics, yes, it's about avoiding accidents. Yes, it's about ensuring people are comfortable and safe. But for me, that only gets you to a neutral point. I think where it gets exciting is when we push the ambition towards the right here in terms of high levels of wellness. A few things perhaps for you to dip into from a reference perspective. There's an initiative called the Well Building Standard. There's one for education, and that can give you some ideas on environment. There's also PAS 6463, designing for neurodiversity. That's another one to look up. And RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, have something called the Inclusive Design Overlay, which is unpacking the idea of getting people with lived experiences and all the other key stakeholders together in that design process that I mentioned earlier. You may have heard of Healthy Schools London if you're dialing in from there. They're doing great stuff as well. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. So there's a few things to think about there. I'm involved in the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics interest group, and we're doing some work too in this area. And I would, if you're interested in a free download, we during COVID developed a little bit of advice on home learning. There's lots of stuff in there about posture, movement, environmental factors. And that might be worth a look too, because there's lots of links to other societies and charities that can give you some advice. So I think my 30 minutes is up. What we do want to avoid is too much of this. I'm all for the technology, and Microlink are absolute experts in this area, and they're going to see just how it's unlocking the potential for people. But I'm just saying, let's use it wisely, and that's why Microlink are here. Thank you.
Thank you
I shall
so
stop
much,
sharing.
Jim. That was fascinating. Why was it that the moment you started talking, I suddenly got backache? It was almost immediate. I suddenly got really conscious of the way I was sitting and the way I was holding myself. But I think you've illuminated a whole issue here. My first issue is young people and technology and the long-term damage that can be done. Could you just talk a little bit more about that? Because it's about yeah, some kids are on it 10 hours, 8 hours. There's the visual aspect you were talking about. How close or far away the technology is from the eyes and the impact it will have on the on the visual system. But also, you mentioned something about disc problems and back problems. Could you just say a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, well, it's. I think we're all very conscious that we are more sedentary than we used to be, and for all sorts of different reasons. Even the topic of walking to school is less common than it used to be. With the traffic, with the safety. There are studies, if you want the evidence. There's been a lot done in Scandinavia and the Netherlands. Or one article stands out, I think it was in the Netherlands, looking at improved attainment with children that cycle to school. And this is just trying to build in more steps, if you like, um, for children. And the older they get, the slower they get. So any opportunity, any tactic we've got to build in movement, we weren't designed to sit, basically. And by the time we're trying to intervene with adults, it's too late. This needs to be built in the first day we formally introduce computers in the school. We can just run a little training and awareness, so that they think about the rights and wrongs of good posture and building in micro movements into the day. Now, you might say that with the ocular headsets and the Wii and everything else, that children gaming are more active. But put it another way: a double maths lesson where you're not encouraged to move is not great for the spine, and it's not great for their attention.
No, that's an excellent point, Jim. Yeah, it's about curriculum design as well as building design in many ways. Um,
Mm.
I was, uh, I was struck by visiting so many schools, which are still Victorian style school buildings. The walls are thick. The flexibility has gone. But have you seen or some schools which have gone past that limitation?
That is a very good question. And I have not, I've been I'm going to be completely honest with you. I need to go back into some of the, follow some of the architects that have been working on some of the refurbishments. I've heard of some good stuff. And I think Healthy Schools London would be a good place to start because they evaluate schools and will nominate, will give them a sort of bronze, silver, gold. And I suspect particularly London, there's a lot of the Victorian sort of Gladstone design
Yes.
schools where I'm
Yes.
sure they've been inventive in being able to, um, reinvent some of those spaces. But I must admit, I can't rattle off some case
No.
stuff. You've caught me out there in terms
No,
of
no,
case
no.
studies I can
It's
refer
it's
to.
it's just fascinating. I will share my screen. I'm very fortunate to be visiting schools through another a Microlink sponsored program. It's called Achieve. It's called Raising Attainment with Well-being.
Mm,
We really want schools to put well-being at the heart of learning, at the heart of leading, and at the heart of teaching. Because actually, if kids are smiling and teachers are smiling and even the janitor's smiling, things tend to happen very positively. I went to a school, a Victorian old build school in Cornwall, and this is I'll just share my screen because it's just wonderful to see what some people are doing. Here's a corner of a classroom. Can you see that? Okay, is that coming through?
yeah.
Yeah. As you can see, they built a refuge corner with cushions and a cover and there's well-being books in that corner. Every classroom has got a little refuge, sometimes a darkened space and one above it. And because it is all part of a move towards well-being, these facilities aren't abused. And they've got an example of a child who comes into school because of their home situation, very dysregulated. But they come in, they go straight into the corner for 10 to 15 minutes. They come out and they're ready to learn. Isn't that lovely?
Mm, absolutely. And I think we're seeing there are actually some, so that's a lovely example of a homemade sort of decompression area. There
Yes.
are some products emerging from companies like VS in Europe where they have teepees so that children can feel like they're part of the learning, but if they need to take a bit of refuge, they can. And it's understood. It's understood with
Perfect.
everybody in the classroom. So, it's the kind of normalization that we need. And I think
Yes.
the younger children are far more open-minded to this than the older ones, perhaps.
I think so. And the other important thing is it's a school initiative. Well-being is at the heart of what they do, so it's not like an imposed bit. One more picture before I go, and this is their sensory regulation room. It's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. I think I've got a video of it. I think in the next slide. Here we go. Uh,
Well, the children
Motion
with the gym.
censored, but so quite a lot of them ask to not move
isn't
for
that
about 10
lovely?
minutes. It goes off, and then they just relax with these lights.
Yeah, okay.
So you can come in there and just go under the sea and feel good. I think
Excellent.
I think it's just marvelous. There is so much you can do, but you actually what you're saying, Jim, it's not can do. It's almost like you must do because actually, in making young people far more aware of body posture, body shape, and carrying themselves properly. Um, we are preventing what will be an epidemic of
Mm.
prodigious proportions as these young people enter the workplace.
Absolutely. And I am with my interest in ergonomics interest group hoping to put together some curriculum ideas actually so that it could be teaching models because ergonomics covers biology, maths, design, engineering, and why not combine the two? let's look at 30 children and their stature and learn about averages and learn about the 5th and 95th percentiles. Let's see what we can do with repurposing the old wooden desks and making them into writing slopes. Let's weave some of this in so that we get a win-win. The children get some learning from it, but they've also contributed to enhancing their own space.
Absolutely. I want to see the curriculum change, and I want to see the curriculum change desperately. We're in a really challenging, I think, 50-year period with AI, generative AI coming in big time. What is the point of setting an essay for a homework? Or there is no point anymore unless you ask the right questions in the right way. Equally, that's that use of space, that use of environment, and also raising the awareness of all of these things. And we can't have a class divide now either, can we? We can't have one. Maybe the more affluent children having better solutions coming through than the ones who might not have the same resource. Oh, I could talk for hours with you, Jim. If anyone's got any points they'd like to make to Jim, please put them in the chat pane. But equally, if you have any questions, queries, or issues, please get in touch with Microlink. I'd like to introduce at this point Michael. Michael, if you're here, Michael is our R&D expert at Microlink. Michael, could you just say something about what you do and how you can connect teachers or schools to people like Jim? Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, that's correct. I've been with modelling for over 25 years now, and I'm deaf myself, and I use the listening device. And I've known Jim on and off for the last 15 years through working with the corporate industry. And and normally what happens is when schools comes to us, if we scratching our heads, we obviously get the vendors and suppliers, developers involved to work with these schools to assist their needs, and if it's a challenging barrier. So there has been cases in the past where with software and hardware, and we always are developers and manufacturers involved. So feel free to reach out if you want to speak to people like Jim about redesigning your classrooms, because he has a lot of experience.
Thank you so much. And basically we have Michael and his colleague Hamdi will be available. If you want to know more about anything that happens, michael.buckfield at microlinkpc.com. Again, what we will be doing after today, it take us 2 or 3 days. We're going to take the 4 hours, the 4 hours of webinars, chop them up into chunks, and get them out to our 600 strong circulation list. Jim, thank you for putting your contacts there for the website. And Jim, we really hope that people will really start to think about this whole process. Really start to think about this process. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
For the invite. Thank you for the invite. See you all soon.